for taking the time to join me this morning. I wanted to invite you here today to react to the congressional redistricting map that was just announced and drawn by our friends over at the Republican Party. Ray DeRossi, my understanding, longtime Republican Senate staffer, drew the lines. This map was drawn behind closed doors, no surprise, by Republicans for Republicans. It's a disservice to voters because voters deserve fair and competitive elections. It breaks apart communities of interest, and let's be honest, it just flat out looks silly. Above all, this map is gerrymandering, plain and simple. There is no other way to describe it. Take the proposed district that was drawn to favor Congressman Steve Stivers. We're calling its shape a reverse Pac-Man. It holds together communities of interest like Upper Arlington and MacArthur, Ohio. Pardon my sarcasm. To drive from northern Union County to Athens to Hillsborough without leaving Steve's district, you'd find yourself on the road for as long as it would take to drive from Columbus to Niagara Falls. We compiled Google Maps directions for you in case you want to take the road this weekend across the proposed district. I have been to MacArthur, Ohio, and of course we've all been to downtown Columbus. These are not like communities of interest. Indeed, Republicans approach their map drawing nonsense with the intention to protect their own members. Again, no surprise. The proposed districts of Steve Stivers, Pat Tiberi, and Steve Shabbat have been drawn to be much more Republican. Today, these districts are roughly 50-50 Democrat to Republican, but they were redrawn to no longer be competitive. It's a slap in the face to the constituents these congressmen serve, because their constituents will now have little chance to hold them accountable. But should we be surprised by what the Republicans are trying to do? We saw what the Republicans did with workers' rights. They closed the doors to the State House literally and passed the worst anti-worker legislation in decades. But the people of this great state fought back. Waging a referendum effort with nearly 1.4 million signatures, Ohioans signed the petition, now placed it on the bill, and soon will repeal Senate Bill 5. We saw what the Republicans did with voting rights. The Republicans ran through a bill that makes it harder to vote and disenfranchises countless Ohioans. But the people are fighting back with a referendum effort. We're collecting the necessary signatures. We'll exceed our goals, and we will place that onerous bill on the November 2012 ballot, and the people of the state will be heard. And once again, we are witnessing State House Republicans rush through shameless, politically motivated legislation with no bipartisanship, no compromise, no public input, and no time for debate. I'm here today to tell you that we are prepared to use every tool, every constitutional resource at our disposal to fight this unfair anti-voter congressional map. We are in the midst of weighing our options for legal challenges in a referendum campaign. While we're not surprised that the Republicans are again ignoring the will of the people, Republicans should not be surprised when the people of the state fight back. With respect to Representative Hoffman in his thoughts about decisions that I or others may make regarding a referendum is not a political response, it's a constitutional response set forth in the state's constitution, giving the people of the state a chance to weigh in on legislation, and in this case, House Bill 319. I also recognize that there may be some in the audience saying, well, Democrats had control for 2 years in the House and 4 years in the governor's office. Why wasn't more done? Let me remind all of you that then Senator Husted introduced a resolution that if he could have gotten the votes from the Republicans in the House, most certainly would have made its way to the ballot. Speaker Budish met repeatedly with then Senator Husted during the course of the speakership of Arnon Budish to discuss this matter and cobble together a compromise that would include the Speaker's legislation, his resolution, which dealt with the apportionment process, and of course, then Senator Husted's legislation that dealt with congressional lines. There was no bipartisan support found from the Republicans for that initiative in the House of Representatives over the course of the 2 years Senator Husted dealt with this particular issue. I welcome any comments or questions.
What grounds of legal challenge go on?
Well, I think that was outlined today in a couple of the newspapers. If you look at the packing that's occurred with Democrats There are some who suggest that that could give us grounds. Additionally, if you look at the map and you discuss communities of like interest, that gives us opportunities to be heard in the courts. Additionally, the constitutional question of placing this as a referendum for voters to agree on or not agree on November 2012 to an option that's available to us. The 90-day window starts clicking upon signature of the governor. The caucus, as well as the delegation, congressional delegation, we've discussed this matter, and those discussions are ongoing.
Chris, in terms of practice, how would that work in terms of what congressional lines would rule during the 2012 election? This is not going to be on the ballot.
It's a very good question. I'll defer to a constitutional expert to address that. My understanding is that the language is silent as it relates to this particular issue. Again, timing is everything. Had Speaker Batchelder spent a greater deal of time on this and actually been involved in the process from a speaker position, working with the legislature, drawing together a bipartisan map, using bipartisan discussions, I don't think that we would be in this position had he started this process earlier, reaching out to the Democrats, trying to cobble together support from both sides of the aisle. We certainly wouldn't be in this position. I also want to say that the position of the state party that we oppose at this point, moving the primary, and we stand in accord with Speaker Budish, Minority Leader Budish, in his efforts. In that regard, we also stand with the Minority Leader in the caucuses, both in the House and the Senate, to delay implementation of the congressional maps. Whether or not the primary, and some may remember this, in 1992 there was a delay in the primary date. There were similar discussions. Some of us may recall that. There was the talk of a shared ground district moving into suburbs of Toledo at the time. Some of you may recall. And the primary date was shifted, and those discussions were had back then. This is a similar situation. Placing House Bill 319 in a referendum because there's no appropriation, there's no emergency clause, starts the 90-day window. Deadlines to file are missed, and the primary would have to be moved. If the necessary signatures are gathered, then House Bill 319 cannot be implemented according to the state's constitution. Thus, congressional maps, this map, would be null and void until passage or rejection by the voters. That would compel the Speaker to sit down and compromise and mediate with the minority on maps that could find bipartisan support. As many of you have reported in the past about other efforts, including Senate Bill 5 most recently, the petitioners can withdraw the petition, the referendum, at any time up until a set window, I think 45 days before the election. Don't quote me on that, whatever that period of time is. That gives us a chance to continue these discussions.
So is the threat of a referendum just an effort to get a compromise on the
No, it's
speaker?
not. We're exploring every constitutional option, every legal option to ensure that the voters of the state and those who live in great cities like Toledo and in Columbus and other areas get fair but adequate representation.
The Democratic proposal, as I recall, did not have a congressional redistricting element.
No, you're right. You're right.
So,
Speaker
was
Budish,
there ever an effort by Democrats to do congressional redistricting?
absolutely. Speaker Budish had been working with Senator Husted on that particular matter, and I would refer you to now Minority Leader Budish about those discussions.
At least some members of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus are considering voting for the bill for the new maps. They like the idea that preserves the minority majority district in Cleveland and also creates a new minority opportunity district in Columbus. What are you telling those members about why they should vote in?
First, I don't tell those members anything. We have discussions. I remind folks that I suppose there was similar reaction in Memphis, Tennessee, when the minority majority district had long been created for Harold Ford Jr. That district's now represented by a white person because of a crowded primary. Encompassing the city of Akron, or the African American neighborhoods of Akron, with the largely east side of Cleveland, Marshall Pledge's home district, does not ensure necessarily representation by an African American. Additionally, I'm quite concerned of the impact the bill has, not just on communities in Cleveland and Akron, but also in the city of Toledo, city of Dayton. We're going to have these conversations with all members through the course of the next several days. I spoke to Leader Budish last night, and he indicated to me that all members had been whipped and asked, and all members are opposed. Democratic members in the House are opposed. I had similar conversations with the Chief of Staff in the Senate for the minority, and the same case was indicated. That was about as of last night. Additionally, I had a conference call yesterday with the congressional delegation, Democratic delegation. Another one scheduled this morning, and those members are opposed to